Hi, everybody. This is Addison Shanlett at AirInsight. It is March the 21st, and my guest today is Stein, who is co-CEO of Eve. And Eve is a child of the Embraer family. Nice to see you, Andre. It's been several years since I've seen you've been tearing the world apart with the eVTOL world. Congratulations. Off to a great start.
Thank you, Addison. And it's always nice to see you again. We had great conversations in the past, so that's always a great opportunity. And it's such a great and hot topic right now. Everything that relates to urban air mobility, advanced air mobility. So let me go back one step and just explain what is Eve. You mentioned it already as one of the childs from Embraer. Eve was actually the first company to graduate from Embraer X. That was created as Embraer Market Accelerator, looking for opportunities to create disruption, to bring exponential growth to the company. And urban air mobility is exactly one of these great opportunities, and it's a very unique moment in the aerospace industry. It's one of that change that might happen once in a generation. When you look on the need, and that's the first thing we look at back in 2017, actually, when you start incubating that project inside Embraer X at that point, we were looking at where you can bring everything that aviation brought to the world and all the know-how we've accumulated inside Embraer to a new market. Right. And urban air mobility is ripe for it. Everyone has been stuck in the traffic force at a certain point of their life. Not everyone, but most people in the world. That's not going away. Cities are still growing. The world's becoming more urban. And even with the pandemic, we are seeing the people returning now and the traffic congestions are back, completely back, if not worse, because now people are avoiding public transportation quite often and want to go in their own car or ride sharing. So that's not disappearing. And what aviation can do, it's bring the same type of benefit that the aerospace sector brought to the longer sectors. Right? Imagine that today you can cross an ocean, you can cross a continent in just a few hours, and then you get to the airport and spend a few hours more just to get home. Right. So bringing the same type of benefit in a very literal way closer to people. And as I said, it's not the congestions are not going away, and even things like what we're doing now in a video conference that became quite usual, and working from home becomes an option for a lot of people, then it actually makes sense for people to move away from the downtown to a bigger house in the outskirts of the city and go to the office maybe once, twice a week, maybe twice a month. And that becomes almost like a small business trip. Right. And then you can use that type of mobility to go there. So it's not intended really to replace ground transportation. It is just capturing a small fraction of the massive amount of people that go from A to B inside this shorter distance. It's not meant to be just a replacement of helicopters or just yet another air taxi service. It's really a disruptive moment where new technologies allow us to address costs, to address noise, and really create a solution that is more affordable. We've done something recently with KPMG to validate this market, what's the size of the market. And there are lots of different numbers out there, but they're all very large. And we came together with KPMG with a number of around $750 billion in the next 20 years. So again, that is a massive potential for a new frontier for aerospace, really.
It's interesting that is a huge number. When we started looking at started tracking orders. I look forward to the deliveries, but starting in basically early 2020, looking at orders. And the order numbers, if for people like us who have been looking at commercial, a big order would be like 50 and 50, or in your line of work now, it's hundreds, because obviously small units. But in the history of aviation, I don't think you've ever seen such high volume of, I guess we shouldn't call them order, they're commitments, right? It's like I promise, you know.
So now what the industry is working with, it's LOIs, like it happened in commercial aviation as well, right? When you launch a new product, first you have LOI. So it's not that different here, but yeah, we are talking about letters of intent.
Right. So it's amazing to see the acceleration. That's where I wanted to get with the comment that supports the thing you did with KPMG. The sheer volume is staggering.
And with some
amazing
big players, right? So, and it's not only us. We are kind of ahead of the game on that one. We have today 1,785 orders in different type of business models, in different geographies. So it's not like one massive customer that's buying everything. It's quite spread around. And if you look at it, it's not unheard of that you have these big fleets in aviation as well. Maybe not that many airlines buy 100, but some do. And here, the unit cost, to your point, it's lower as well, right? Compared with commercial aircraft in particular. But what we're seeing, and that was a big question in the beginning, would that be flown by operators, or it's here, often people refer to these things as flying cars. They're not cars, they're aircraft, right? And you are seeing airlines coming on board of this idea. You are seeing helicopter operators that are struggling with the returning on their existing market, because, for example, offshore it's shrinking. So we have looking at helicopter operators that want to be a part of urban air mobility. We have ride-sharing companies looking at it. We have leasing companies being big customers and willing to play a big role, and some of the traditional ones from the commercial aviation industry are jumping in this market as well. So when you have all these different players that are fearing missing out, choose a Silicon Valley term, the FOMO, the fear of missing out, they want to be part of that. And when you look around it in other parts of the ecosystem, that's happening too. You just got the Asiana sign a partnership with us, investing on the company. They're investing $30 million at Eve, and they're looking at building vertiports of looking at the charging infrastructure as well. So too many moving parts. It's going to be exactly the way everybody's planning? No, because first of all, people are looking at it in different ways. But the things are moving and moving towards the right direction. We are seeing things that some years ago were, oh, no way, that's not going to happen before in 2050. And now, oh yeah, let's go aviation, for example. It's getting pretty close to be reality in several segments. It is already in the smaller segment of aerospace, right? Some light aircraft are fly electric. And that was that is potentially like a big game changer. And more and more, that becomes something that all the big organizations are looking at as well. So the startups, they do keep us honest, right? They did, and I have nothing but the utmost respect on how they became a catalyst in this market. And now all the big boys are in the playground as well and looking at it with different models and different ways. But that's happening.
You've got the story down here, but I have a couple of ideas I want to share. Well, ask you about. The first thing is you mentioned how Eve came out of Embraer X. The acceleration we've spoken about a little bit. Do you have anything you can share with us in terms of what does it cost to have? Is there a list price on for one of your units? And second of all, could you explain to us where you are in terms of the technology for battery power and motors?
Mm-hmm. So to your previous point, what we've done, and that one of the ideas even before launching, even on the incubation period, was exactly to look on the best practice inside Embraer, what you do right, but add some of the disruptive concepts, like building up proof of concepts to develop the technology, not only the technology, but the actual solution faster, and to understand where the problems might be. So we've never done that before in previous aircraft. Normally, when you launch a prototype of aircraft, it's pretty much a pre-production aircraft. You're going to change some fine tuning here and there. But now we are working with proof of concepts that don't look like the final product, but allow us to look on the system integration, including batteries, allow us to look on the aerodynamics of hover, which is new, allow us to look at things like the integration between the batteries and the motors, the noise aspects, a lot of things that are new to the industry, not only new to us, right? So it's something that did help us to learn faster, right? Rather than doing everything theoretically and then do a model and then try with a final product, and knowing which are the most relevant building blocks and focus on that. I mentioned about the proof of concepts, but also like the control laws. We have been flying these control laws since mid 2020 in an engineering simulator that allow us to write the control laws already thinking about certification. So this is not a drone. It does carry people on board. So it needs to have the same level of safety as any other aircraft, right? So it is that allow us to try all that and mix these building blocks in the proper order and keep on moving forward. And we mentioned, and sorry, Adson, the second part of the question, just
price. Can you give
the pricing point? We have not made it public, a list price, but you are talking about the order of magnitude around $3 million for unit. So again, when you compare with
the purpose of the number is to get, where does this fit in terms of if you were buying a private aircraft, where would that fit? Just a guidance, really.
Yeah, when you look at it, and particularly when you're talking about both FAA as ANAC here in Brazil, the safety levels of these aircraft, of the eVTOLs, the requirements are pretty close to commercial aviation standards, actually.
Right.
So that if you compare to a large helicopter, like a twin turbine helicopter, that's considerably lower, right? If you compare with some of the helicopters that are out there and are like piston helicopters, that they will be cheaper than that, but they would not comply with the certification level that it's being required by the authorities to fly in volume. And that's another key aspect. When you're looking at it, we don't see the majority of the market as private aviation. And if you look in our market so far, we have been selling fleets of that to operators that sell tickets. So by the end of the day, and this selling of the ticket might be in different shape and forms. It might be ride sharing, it might be scheduled flights. There are different business models that do make sense. But the bottom line is the vast majority of the market related to that type of approach. That's where the gain and the benefit is. So that allows for the end user to face a much lower cost as well, for the passenger to pay less. And you're talking about potentially for a 20-mile sector or 30-kilometer sector, something around $100 at the entering service, which is rather comparable with the ground transportation. If you get a taxi from JFK to New York, that's how much it's going to cost more or less, right? And as you move on and batteries reduce, we expect batteries to reduce in cost. And we are talking about a future that is autonomous, that can be reduced even further.
So we're saying here that, and again, this is preliminary, it's an evolving thing, but we're talking about a ride that is roughly 20 to 30 minutes.
The typical ride is even less than that, 10 to 15 maybe.
Okay, so all right, so I'm thinking about JFK to Manhattan would be, let's say, 30, 40-minute ride in a car, could be 15 minutes in an Eve.
And could be 2 or 3 hours in a car as well, right?
Right, that's true. So, okay, so, and we're talking about maybe a bit of a premium on the price because, quite honestly, you would pay a premium because you'd save so much time. And go ahead.
No, yeah, that's the idea. But a premium that's not an order of magnitude more. You're talking about maybe like 50% more, comparable. And again, we don't see that as something that necessarily people are going to use every day. So the day that you need to be back home earlier because it's your kid's birthday, or you want to catch a flight, and that's very time sensitive.
Right.
And particularly because you don't have the traffic, right? So when you look at sectors like that, it might be 30, 40 minutes by car, but it easily can be a couple hours, depending on the time of the day, depending on the day itself.
And the way you're developing the device now, it doesn't have a pilot. It's autonomous.
No, it does. The way you are doing today, I mentioned about to believe the future is autonomous. So what that means, we are developing an aircraft that's designed to start its life as a pilot aircraft. So it's a 4-seater plus 1 pilot. On the image here, you can see the seat just behind me in the middle here.
Okay, in the middle seat. Okay, that's the driver.
Yeah. So yeah, like a separate cockpit. That's again, it's more similar to what you see on commercial aviation than on general aircraft. But start with as much as you can ready for autonomous future. So we can use the first years of operation to build up enough data and empirical data, not only to develop the solution, but mainly to work with the regulatory environment to assure that you want to move to autonomous flights, it's a safe way, it's a safe move. So the idea, it's really starting with a pilot, operate for a time within that environment, acquire enough data to move to an autonomous future. And when you do that, not only you are removing the cost of the pilot, but also we are using one of the key mechanisms to reduce the unit cost. You are adding seats. You are adding at least one, if not two, because we're removing the pilot and the cockpit, right? So the same aircraft that today is being designed to carry 4 passengers plus a pilot could carry 5 or 6 passengers.
Andre, how much of the IP that you guys are developing at Eve is usable upstream at Embraer?
So a few points about IP, and here where it's an area where we, as Eve, you do have quite an advantage against someone that starts from scratch, because you have access to all of Embraer background IP royalties free, right? And what you have, it is the vector for the company to enter the urban air mobility market. So Embraer will not be adding another product on that market. But yes, some of the learnings could move upstream. And that exactly was the point of the initial point of the discussion when you're looking about electrification, about autonomous vehicles, and the key concept of disruptive innovation. So when you look on electrification, for example, batteries are not ready by no means, and maybe never be ready to fly hundreds of passengers for thousands of kilometers. They're not there. But when you look on the very concept of disruptive innovation, it's about starting smaller. You cannot do something as complex as something like a commercial jet that carries like more than 100 people.
Like the original flight.
Yeah. So you begin on the entry level, and then, okay, technology is good enough for me to carry a few people not that far off. So I can enter that market. And that, of course, a lot of the learnings can move upstream. Absolutely.
Excellent. Of course, the nature of that question is because of the vision that Ariane and his team and Rodrigo were sharing a few months ago about, you know, the potential fleet as it evolves. And there's clearly a crossover from the 4-seater to the small airplane with wings to the regional size. But my last question for you is, if we look 10 years out, what is the vision? How do you see the eVTOL market?
So we are talking about entering service in 2026, right? So when you're talking about 10 years in the market, these vehicles will be in the market already. They will become in several cities around the globe a choice for people to move in. So if you're talking about maybe 100,000 vehicles in the next 20 years, we're talking about up to 50,000 by 2035, right? So it is that order of magnitude. At that, the interesting about urban mobility that allows us or the industry to grow city by city. So we expect to see several cities around the globe having that as an option already. And as we are choosing to do that with local partners, that does help that mindset. So we are not starting operations in one given city, but as we are starting with a partner in US or in Europe or in London or here in Brazil, and he selects the city to start, it's easier to grow there because it's a smaller geographical environment. So it's easier to see that once it starts in a city like Sao Paulo, like London, like Miami, it's gonna grow and it's gonna reach its potential exponentially. That we do expect that growth to be fast, at a city level. So in 10 years, I do see that as another option to people move around the city, to actually have that opportunity to say, okay, today I'm gonna drive my car, tomorrow I'm gonna just get a ride sharing app in the car, but after tomorrow I have this thing and I'm gonna fly. That's the bottom line. But when thinking a bit more than that, in a more broader way, when you look at the whole ecosystem for urban air mobility, if you stop and think everything that the internet, for example, brought to the world and how much it changed the way we do things with data and content moving from A to B in a very seamless, integrated, affordable way, right? There is a lot of technology behind it. There is 5G, satellites, fiber optics, but for the user, that's seamless, affordable, easy, streamlined on a way of data moving from A to B. The concept for the future for us is to bring that to the physical world. So people and goods being able to move from A to B in a very affordable, seamless, easy way. And there are a lot of technologies behind it, and there are a lot of different building blocks. So we are tackling one of these pain points, which is urban air mobility, and we are addressing several parts of this ecosystem, either with our solutions, when we are bringing the vehicle, we are bringing a solution for urban air traffic management, which is another key aspect. We are bringing solutions, as we'd expect, for service and support, and even for operations. And we are working with partners like the recent news about Acciona to work in the overall ecosystem and really bring that solution.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, Edson. Are you going to